Entergy is proud to support programming on LPB and greener practices that preserve Louisiana.
The goal of our environmental and sustainability initiatives really is to ensure that our kids and future generations can be left with a cleaner planet.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.
We will be here literally for years working on this.
Hurricane emergency workers dig in for the long haul.
We need to really plan for more difficult weather under what's happening with climate change.
The farm industry recovering from the hard freeze.
If you could change the trajectory of their quality of life with just one TikTok video.
A new breed of doctors in Louisiana with a global platform.
Hi everyone, I'm Kara St. Cyr.
And I'm Andre Moreau. We'll have much more on those top stories in a moment on this week's edition of SWI. But first, the big news from the governor's COVID media briefing this week.
Yeah, Governor Edwards moved the state to phase 3, which loosens COVID-19 restrictions. Bars and restaurants can allow more people inside. Mask mandates will remain in place.
Yeah, but dozens of legislators sent a letter to the governor asking to lift the mask protocol like Texas and Mississippi did this week. He remains firm why it's important to keep masks.
As you ease restrictions on occupancy, for example, and you bring more people into a venue, it is more important than ever that you wear a mask as a way to not increase transmission of the virus.
And now we'll look at other big news from around the state that includes more about the COVID vaccines. To get coronavirus vaccines in arms, the state has begun using the single-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine for large walk-up gatherings. The first was Thursday at the New Orleans Convention Center, at Old Zephyr Field in Metairie, the Lake Charles Civic Center, and more, with Bossier City, Moreau, Rayne, New Iberia, Lafayette, and St. Tammany Parish beginning this weekend. Department of Health Secretary Dr. Courtney Phillips says, though limited, there's enough vaccine to expand access. Meantime, Texas Tuesday became the biggest state to lift its mask rule. They joined a growing movement by governors and other leaders to loosen pandemic restrictions. This despite pleas from public health leaders to not let their guard down. Check out this picture from Twitter about a business in Mississippi. A renewed plan to get new voting machines is shelved again, thanks to a barrage of complaints about the bid process from fellow Republicans. Republican Secretary of State Kyle Ardoin says we need the machines, but with voter confidence damaged by what he calls those who spread misinformation, he will spend the next few months trying to restore voter confidence. Global Star, a SAT communications company in Covington, is reporting a loss of more than $21 billion in its fourth quarter. That's a loss of 1 cent per share. The company posted a revenue of $33 million in the same period. Elmer's Island Wildlife Refuge near Grand Isle is open again. It was battered and closed after Hurricane Zeta in November. Crews repaired roads and improved access to it, built kayak launches, and are finishing an observation deck in the marshes. Delgado Community College in New Orleans has teamed up with Ochsner Health to expand training for nurses and allied health professionals. Ochsner is putting up $10 million for the effort. Delgado graduates 1,200 nursing and health pros each year. The Whitney Plantation Museum, that tells the story of the enslaved, is receiving a $250,000 grant. It's from the Kellogg Foundation. The museum says it only averages 1,000 visitors a month now, compared to 10,000 pre-pandemic. Greater Baton Rouge is 2021's third most obese metro area in America. WalletHub says it put together this information in the top 100 markets where weight-related problems are big. LSU released the findings of a law firm's investigation today that revealed the university failed to correctly handle sexual misconduct and domestic violence complaints going back years. President Tom Galligan delivered the news at a Board of Supervisors meeting, saying this milestone, sad day, will forever measure where we go from here. Emails revealed former athletic director Joe Oliva wanted ex-coach Les Miles fired back in 2013 for advances toward female students, but that didn't happen. At least 2 athletic officials are suspended without pay. Next Friday on SWI, I'll talk at length with President Galligan about all that and explore the culture change at LSU he says will happen.
It could be a groundbreaking settlement in Louisiana's love-hate relationship with big oil. Attorney General Jeff Landry signed onto a proposed $100 million settlement with Freeport McMoran. Settlement dollars going to help restore the state's disappearing coast. Baton Rouge lawyer John Kermouche negotiated the deal on behalf of parish governments. He believes it will become a blueprint for agreements with other oil and gas companies that would end years of lawsuits by parishes and the state.
Nursing homes are where Louisiana saw the first reports of coronavirus illnesses, clusters of confirmed cases, and deaths. This week, a year into the pandemic, 2 national groups representing thousands of nursing care facilities announced an 82% drop in COVID cases since a peak in December. They say it shows vaccinations are working. Here's part of a discussion about the very tough lessons they have learned.
We were dealing with a pandemic with a virus that was very different from what we dealt with before, which is that it was spread by asymptomatic carriers. We didn't have the PPE that we needed to take care of it. And back in March, we had almost no testing. The testing that did exist would take days and sometimes a week or more to get back. And so when the governors were faced with a whole bunch of different decisions as they faced this crisis, they have to make decisions based on incomplete information, and sometimes they make good decisions and sometimes they don't. But we were very active in advising governors on various policies that they should follow. And one thing that seemed clear to us was that it was not a good idea to discharge COVID positive folks from hospitals to every single nursing home. I think the important thing now is, what do we do going forward? What we learned in March and April was that if you don't prioritize people that live in nursing homes, if you don't show the dignity to these people that they deserve, that you're going to have tragic consequences. We didn't have the PPE. We didn't have the testing. We weren't made a priority as these people should have been, and tens of thousands of them died unnecessarily.
In the past 2 years, the crawfish industry was hit by several highs and lows. High waters and the pandemic pushed the industry to a standstill. Now, after a hard freeze, farmers and fishermen are unsure about the rest of the season.
Crawfish are very sensitive to slight changes. If there's a disruption in temperature or water depth, they'll react, and not always for the better. In 2019, crawfish farmers learned this hard lesson.
The high water coming from the Mississippi that goes into the Atchafalaya, there was a disruption in the normal oxygen levels there in the water. And so what happened is that we had a loss of a lot of crawfish.
A crawfish needs a specific amount of water to live properly. If the depth gets too low, they'll bury themselves in the ground, and farmers and fishermen can't get to them. If the water is too high, they might suffocate. They can also be displaced. In 2019, when the Atchafalaya and Mississippi River flooded, that was the case for a lot of fishermen. 2020 didn't ease the burden of that crawfish season. Duane Smith, a crawfish farmer in Ville Platte, says the initial lockdown was frightening for farmers.
It's been an up and down show, like it normally. And then last year in particular, we got shut down for COVID, I guess February, 1st of March. And we had to kind of stop fishing for a small period to let everybody get adjusted to we didn't know how things were going to go, and then even to how to sell them.
Mike Strain, the Commissioner of Agriculture and Forestry, says it was devastating for a lot of the industry.
Is that all that situation was compounded by COVID-19. The majority of crawfish that are consumed, live crawfish, are actually consumed in restaurants and by big crawfish boils. And what happened is when the restaurants couldn't utilize the product and people weren't having crawfish boils, then 2 things happened. 1, there was no market for the crawfish, and 2, the price dropped precipitously. And so it really had a tremendous negative impact on the crawfish industry. and the cost was, between 83 cents and $1 a pound, directly attributed to COVID, plus no market. And so they had a real devil of a time, and we were hoping for a good year this year.
But unfortunately, 2021 is off to a rocky start for farmers. 2 weeks ago, a hard freeze gripped the South for days. Smith said the ice was so thick he couldn't fish.
Well, they definitely put the brakes on anything that we were doing. Actually, the week before the ice, things were finally picking up on production somewhat. And then once that happened, probably it was 6 days before we were able to go back into the ponds and make another run, which that run was good because that was left over from that Friday. And then after that, it was dead all that week.
We lost a couple of weeks of growth of those because the crawfish don't grow when it's cold and they don't eat. And also it was too cold for the crawfishermen to get out there and fish for crawfish, and the crawfish don't go into the traps with the bait when it's too cold. So we lost a couple of weeks of prime season when the price is generally its best. The price is very good now. And as we get into Lent and after Easter, the price generally goes down. That's a normal cycle. But one of the concerns we have this year is that there may be a lesser supply at the end of the season by June and July. And we lost a couple of weeks of our prime crawfish prime crawfish time, because there were just a very limited crawfish on the market. The good news is they're coming back on the market, and I think they're going to be fine.
Strain is unsure just how much of the crawfish season will be compromised by the weather. He thinks there's a chance the crop may run out before the end of the normal season. As for the price, it's too early to tell what that'll look like. That all depends on the consumer.
You can say it took a week for sure for things to get back right, water to warm up and whatever. And then it worked in the fields that we were producing crawfish already, but some of the stuff that wasn't catching them, we still not catching. And that's what I'm hearing from neighbors and whatever. The catch has not doubled, and we're not just bombarded with crawfish. It's just, we keep waiting for it to happen.
Unfortunately, crawfish farms weren't the only farm businesses hurt by the freeze. Strawberry farms and soybean industries were hurt by the ice, especially in areas further up north, like Shreveport.
Our strawberry farmers, probably 35 to 40% of the crop was lost. It got so cold that when we lost, the blooms coming on, that becomes, a strawberry. We're hoping that we'll be able to have some nice strawberries by the time we get to Easter. And so we lost some of that. We lost some of the fruits and vegetables that did, some like cabbages and broccoli and other things that were in those winter vegetables that are out in the field.
Things like sugarcane and nurseries were also compromised by the ice. Combined, that's thousands of dollars lost.
And if you look at other different commodities, if you look at above I-10, you get up in Alexandria, we're probably going to have some loss of sugarcane. We had a devastating effect to our nurseries, our nursery crop, our nursery plants, which is a very big industry here in Louisiana. If you go in the Forest Hill area, it was especially a hard hit because they were below freezing for 5 days. They had ice and sleet, and freezing rain that collapsed greenhouses and destroyed millions of dollars worth of plants.
Strain says he's expecting events like this to happen more often because of the unpredictable weather coming in from all directions.
If you look at these weather patterns, if you go from Katrina, Rita, Gustav, Ike, Faye, just pick, all of the different hurricanes and all the latest group of hurricanes as well, and the Great Flood of 2016 and the ice storm, and we ran out of names, then we ran out of the Greek alphabet, right? And we had to move into another alphabet. So that just tells you that we need to be, if we can, any way we can, better prepared and more self-reliant on whatever weather comes our way, because I do think that we need to really plan for more difficult weather under what's happening with climate change.
The commissioner says that they're working with both state and federal delegations to provide assistance to all farmers affected by that ice.
We are 6 months out from devastating Hurricane Laura and that record hurricane season in Louisiana. We have talked with Lake Charles Mayor Nick Hunter about recovery. Tonight, 2 top emergency leaders sum up where we stand.
If there was a grade being given on recovery process so far, where would we stand?
I think from the state perspective, we would be probably somewhere around a B. Recovery is always difficult, and certainly housing recovery is especially complicated and difficult because you just can't replicate on that kind of scale the resources that you need after an event like that as quickly as possible. But from a critical infrastructure perspective, from a utilities, water, all of those perspectives, I think the locals in partnership with the state and federal government have done a tremendous job.
Where are we standing now with terms of people who are not in their homes yet?
There are still about 400 people in those non-congregate shelter hotels. And FEMA is working through our direct temporary housing program. We looked at about 10,000 families that were initially eligible. We expect eventually to house about 3,000 of those families in FEMA's direct temporary housing program. Today, we are about a third of the way there with 1,200 families licensed into those units. This is the hardest and most complex thing we do, and we are estimating that it will take us until September or October before we get everybody into those temporary housing units. Of all the housing missions I've ever been associated with, this one has gone the smoothest. It is not ever fast enough to suit anyone. We put more than $1 billion into people's pockets in federal money since Hurricane Laura hit, and we're working hard to fund the cleanup and the rebuild of public infrastructure.
When we saw the imagery from Hurricane Laura, this was a destructive event. And so when you go back to Southwest Louisiana, particularly, that landscape is different. And so the number of homes that were not just damaged, but in Cameron Parish, completely wiped away with empty slabs standing there today. And the homes in Calcasieu and Lake Charles that didn't just have a tree down in the yard, but the roof was gone and much of the home was damaged. And the fact that the storm retained its hurricane strength all the way to the state line and truly was a statewide event for us. Insurance funding is not fast enough. The supply chain for materials, doors, windows, shingles, that's not fast enough. And so none of those systems are able to keep up with the pace that people want to go.
What were the challenges of having multiple hurricanes in a pandemic?
The sheltering piece itself initially, I don't think it can be overstated just how difficult a task that was to be able to house that many people in hotels in such a short period of time, and just a Herculean effort to be able to make that happen.
How long does FEMA stay with a storm like this?
We start before the storm hits, we do the response, and then we shift into recovery. At the peak, we had about 1,800 federal people working these events. Today, we still have about 800. We are focused now, in addition to getting people housed, and again, paying for the cleanup and the rebuilding of infrastructure. We will be here literally for years working on this.
The guy you see there, you likely know him as the Onk Doc, and he has a huge plan to help change how people view cancer. His reach on TikTok is enormous, and just as that app redefined the way we use social media in 2020, Dr. Sanjay Juneja could redefine how doctors can deliver their message of health.
I can't talk right now.
To the world, he's the hip, informed, approachable, lovable Onk Doc, with a social media following racing toward 500,000 viewers.
Hey there, my name is Dr. Sanjay Juneja, also known as the Onk Doc on TikTok and Instagram.
Drpedia.com delivers his impeccable credentials, trained and triple specialized in internal medicine, hematology, and oncology. He's upfront about a doctor's scariest diagnosis that he tries to make not so scary.
Sometimes it's a beast, but it's the difference of having a beast in a room and you're in the corner not knowing how to handle it versus the beast kind of being on a collar and chain and in the corner of the room. It exists, but you own it.
When we met, I told him I thought he was in Beverly Hills, not Baton Rouge, being a social media superstar. But there we were in the clinic where he and his wife Lauren Janeja are founding medical partners, and where his TikTok viewers see him every day, hanging on his every educational post, like one recently that rapidly went viral.
Ooh. Ooh. What? I think over 1 million views in 72 hours, and so many people just saying like, wow, like I should ask my doctor about this, or I should get blood work because I have these, symptoms. Any social media creator would say it's all about the lighting and video quality.
Course,
so
right.
And then you have something like that.
He has a global classroom.
And then you just kind of sit here and do this talk, or you got to do the doctor voice this way sometimes, or you
Perfect for a guy who can entertain and inform, and who grew up wanting to be a teacher, inspired by those who taught him.
I had a really cool science teacher in middle school here, actually, Dr. Duvall, and he has no idea of this story, but he kind of made me want to do and teach science, because I realized like when you can really understand and appreciate the things around you, like in a physics capacity, and just understand how they all work, you can just kind of appreciate day-to-day, things more.
After a bad car wreck in high school, his doctor helped him set his life's path.
And lost my eyesight basically for a couple of weeks, really, with all the dilation and everything like that. It was traumatic from the accident. I was kind of looking in hindsight and wondering like, why wasn't I scared? And I realized it was my ophthalmologist, Dr. Grenier. He just kind of gave me goals. So that's what made me really decide to do medical school. I felt that cancer specifically, I had several experiences with families and patients. Cancer specifically is so intimidating and so derailing psychologically, not just for the patient, but the family. And I felt like where else is it more important than to be able to kind of help the headspace with education and empowerment and all these things and be there for them than in the field of oncology. So that's what kind of led me there. I just really value and have come to value quality, because whether you cure somebody or not, we all pass away. So if the process is 2 years to cure or not cure, day-to-day quality of life is very important. I'll put TikTok up, and then I'll put one of my videos, and basically we just rock and roll.
As for that TikTok, Instagram global classroom, he says something that just happened while still in med school, and that took off and gave him access to anyone, anywhere.
And then I started getting followers into the thousands, and that's where I'm not sure what came to me exactly, but I was like, well, let's not do all of this in vain. I guess in Indian culture, we have this concept of like balance. So if you have like a lot of like attention and followers and people are saying, oh, this is great, you want to kind of balance that out with something to do some good into the world. Otherwise, it's unhealthy. The first thing I started speaking on was cancer screenings. There's a lot of screening that isn't being done nearly as much as it should. So with like CT lung screening, so that applies to unfortunately just smokers right now. Hopefully the data shows it'll benefit non-smokers. So you get a low dose CT chest image to see if you have an early cancer. It goes back to the concept of quality of life is so important. With oncology, you realize it's just so finite. If you could change the trajectory of their quality of life with just one TikTok video, I mean, that's huge, and the number of people you can reach.
So you're not necessarily giving a diagnosis or telling someone how to cure something they have.
Right.
You're posing questions that they may have themselves, it seems like.
Yes, and I'm really glad, you said that, because that is important. Like, there's so much stuff out there on the World Wide Web, right? 1990s, whenever it came out, with all this information that's saying, you have this, you need to do this. And fact and fiction is not regulated at all. I just kind of put it out there just like they would if they Googled it, or if they went to these other sites that are said to give medical information. It's just an extra piece of information that they can take to then optimize their health. The point is, you have to understand something to get enthusiastic about it. So that's what I think, and I'm hoping this does. By the time we get our first history and physical, as an adult, we're 21, 22, and we just kind of get a lot of things thrown at us. But kids and teenagers are on social media now, so when this health stuff is popping up, even if you're not following me and kind of annoyed that it's popping up, you're learning stuff that one thing may click and say, ooh, that's interesting how the blood relates to your energy or your shortness of breath, or that's interesting that, whatever those things are. Now you have people interested in learning about health at an early age. So then you would think that they're really more proactive when they do get into their 20s and 30s, whereas otherwise, people, even my generation, we didn't have that background because there was no social media and you only knew what you read, yourself out of a textbook.
Well, he is way more than you'd read in a textbook, and he's also a coveted speaker on the national stage. Can you be more impressed about somebody? I mean, I wasn't. He's amazing.
Yeah, and another amazing person coming out of Baton Rouge. Next week, we will feature Baton Rouge native and cancer survivor Haley Arsenault right here on SWI. She'll be part of the first all-civilian flight into space.
Yeah, check this out. She launches this coming October with the rest of the group. She'll make history on a bunch of levels aboard the Inspiration 4. First American woman who's not an astronaut in space. Youngest person at 29, first cancer survivor in space.
She beat childhood cancer and now works at St. Jude Hospital in Memphis. Next week, what she's expecting with this huge endeavor.
Yeah, and she's also a former LPB Louisiana Young Hero. Everyone, that is our show for this week. Remember, you can watch LPB on demand on your phone or tablet with our LPB Anywhere app.
The download is free from the App Store. You can catch LPB News and public affairs shows, as well as other Louisiana programs you've come to enjoy over the years. And please, like us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
For everyone here at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Moreau.
And I'm Kara St. Cyr. Thank you for watching.
Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Entergy is proud to support programming on LPB and greener practices that preserve Louisiana.
The goal of our environmental and sustainability initiatives really is to ensure that our kids and future generations can be left with a cleaner planet.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.